Welcome to Imposter's podcast, where we affirm the lived experiences of professionals of color who navigate imposter syndrome and racial toxicity at work. Here, we will get very open about all that it means to be a professional of color. We'll talk about race and racism, trauma and healing, conflict and resolution, and liberation and authenticity. The tools that you learn here will help you confidently address racial toxicity at work, put that imposter syndrome to the side, stand in your power, and resist racial gaslighting. I'm your host, Whitney Knox Lee, a Black mother to Black boy children, a civil rights attorney, and an anti-racism educator and trainer. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We're glad you're here. Episodes are published every week. Make sure you go back and listen to our past episodes. All right, here we go. Welcome to Imposter's podcast. My name is Whitney Lee, and I'm your host, and I'm excited right now because we are being joined by several folks in my Sista Circle. They are the people that I rely on and go to whenever I'm experiencing any of the things. So I've asked them to join me and share with me what their experiences have been overcoming imposter syndrome. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but today I'm joined by Cassandra, Veronica, and Rhonda. So Cassandra, tell us about yourself. Who are you and what identities are you bringing to this space?
I am Cassandra Walker. I work in education field as a school counselor, and I also am a licensed professional counselor. I identify as she and her. I can't wait to share more about my experience with imposter syndrome.
Awesome. Thanks, Cassandra. Okay, Veronica, who are you?
All right. So I'm Veronica Arnold. My pronouns are she, her as well. I'm a mental health therapist. I work at a university in the Atlanta metro area. And yeah, that's what I do.
Awesome. Thanks, Veronica. Okay, Rhonda, who are you?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Bass. I'm an attorney, a mother, and a wife. And I've been practicing for about 30 years. So I'm midlife in the game. And I'm just excited about being on the Impostrix podcast.
Yes. Thank you. And they didn't say this, but they all Black.
Very Black.
Proud to the people.
So our perspective today is, we're coming at you as Black women in our respective professions. And like I said at the outset, for me, having a Sista Circle is really like one of my key tools that I use to overcome imposter syndrome. These are the people who I'm constantly checking myself against, or like checking to see, okay, is it me? Like, am I being crazy? Or like, is it something that's happening around me that's not right or that's not fitting within my values? And they've been in my life for as long as my husband. We'll just say that, as long as my husband. They've definitely been a steady presence in my life. And so I'm super grateful for them. So I want to start off just by asking this question. When have you all experienced and overcome imposter syndrome? And what I'd love for you to do is just give an example of like what you did to overcome that imposter syndrome and how it went. Because I know for me, there have been times where like I have used the tools, whether that's, dressing up for the part or calling y'all. But there are also times where I just felt really like restricted by my own mental attitude around the imposter syndrome and what I was experiencing. So I'd love to hear from you guys about what you've done that's worked and like why you think it's worked.
Can you define imposter syndrome? I think that might be good for people who may not really know what it is. I mean, I actually had to look it up.
Okay. Yes. So when I'm thinking about imposter syndrome, what I'm thinking about is the feeling that I get. And for me, it's usually like a gut feeling in addition to an intellectual feeling of like I'm not good enough in this space, or like I'm going to be found out. People who studied what they called imposter phenomenon, they defined it as an intellectual phoniness, like a feeling of being intellectually phony, and this ongoing fear of being found out. Does that clarify for you?
It does.
Does that align with how you experience it?
It does, yes. I know that was a little stutter there, but I mean, just like I said, I looked up the definition to get clear about what it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, like, for me, what's really interesting about this concept of imposter syndrome is that initially, when it was studied and kind of realized and coined, the pool of people who were studied were white women, high achieving white women who were middle to upper class. And so, I think when we add in our Blackness, for me, imposter syndrome kind of can take on another. I feel like I might feel it more intensely than maybe other people, because not only do I like internally feel as though I'm not good enough, but externally, the messaging that I've heard throughout my life is that I'm not good enough, or that I'm only good for a couple of things, entertainment and sex, and that like lawyering is not one of those things that I'm good for. So, Cassandra, what's up?
Okay, so one thing that I can say that I noticed that I've done is really like affirm myself, remind myself of my core values, acknowledge my self-worth, and really sometimes use like positive affirmations. Something that I say to myself all the time during obstacles is that I'm not a quitter. So like I'll repeat that in my head often. In one particular situation, I showed up to the plate and worked hard. I kind of provided evidence to show that I am doing everything that I need to do with my job. And then at the end of the situation, I had like 20 pages of notes when my coworkers had like 2 pages or 3 pages. So, that was really enough because I just wrote it to myself. Always tell myself I'm not a quitter. I mean, that's something I've been doing for years, and it's just like ingrained in me. And I just say, I'm not a quitter. I'm not a quitter. And so that really helps with resilience, um,
Mm,
determination,
mhm.
and I am a very hard worker. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And I love that. And I also have questions about, like, so how do you ensure that you're resting?
Yeah. I do struggle with having a healthy work-life balance. Um, I do rest. I go to bed early at times when I feel physically more fatigued. I can feel it. And so at times I've had 2 jobs, and that definitely was a toll on me. But I do have flexibility in my life as a single Black woman. I will rest on the weekends. So I do have a lot of flexibility and freedom in my life, in my personal time, so that I do catch up on rest like that. Or I'll have weekends when I dedicate to Netflix.
Yeah. I just think it's important because, particularly for people who are listening, who are the people that will like push through anything. I mean, I think most of us are, and I haven't really verbalized that value as this affirmation of I'm not a quitter, but that's essentially what I'm telling myself. And for me, sometimes that turns into a way to like force something that maybe shouldn't happen, or that like I'm just not there, and I have to like acknowledge for myself when those times are happening. And obviously in the workplace, sometimes we just have to do the thing. And I think that's for Cassandra and for myself and others, where it's like, okay, Whitney, I know you don't like this. I know this doesn't feel comfortable. I know you want to procrastinate, but like we actually have to do this thing, whether or not we feel like we're equipped to do it. Like we have to do the thing. And then there are other times where it's like, okay, do I actually have to do this thing? Is this additional work that I'm putting on myself for no reason? Am I interested in this work? Do I have time and capacity to do this work? So I appreciate that. Okay, Veronica. So can you tell us about a time where you experienced imposter syndrome, the tool that you use? Like how do you get over or get through or rise above your imposter syndrome?
So imposter syndrome, like, is something that's definitely come up a lot for me professionally. A lot of people come into the mental health world like as their second profession, so they're older. So I kind of just went straight through from undergrad to grad school, straight through the licensure. And so it made me qualified, at least on paper, to be able to do some things, you know, where I would be the youngest person in the room or the blackest person in the room, like in the way that would just make me a little intimidated. People will be in the room talking about their doctorates and, how in their other career they, I don't know, save children in Africa, some junk. And I'm like, well, I just,
Not Africa.
like, I don't have a lot going on. Like, I didn't have the same things going on. So I would definitely come up against that a lot of times. And also with clients in some of the areas that I work, like different geographical areas where there weren't a lot of Black people or there weren't a lot of Black mental health professionals. Clients would come in and then they might question my qualifications, which then would in turn make me question my qualifications. Like I would either be too young or they would feel like I wouldn't understand their life experiences because we didn't share the same skin color. And so some of the ways I work through that, like Cassie, I'm a big fan of affirmations. Mine have a tendency to be a little bit more ratchet. So I'll use a song, I'll use, whatever I can find to kind of bolster me. I turn to my Sista Circle all the time to say, okay, I'm not feeling like, am I in the right here? Am I doing this right? And y'all are always affirming of that experience. But also I try to use my therapeutic experience because there's a thing called cognitive behavior therapy. And in cognitive behavior therapy, it talks a lot about your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior. So a cognition is a thought. If you have a negative thought, that's going to impact your behavior, that's going to impact your feelings. And so when I find myself, with my negative self-talk, like, oh man, like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, why are you here? They just invited you in because you're nice. Like, you just a child. Like, even though I'm not a child by a long shot anymore in my brain, I'm like, I'm 12. So I try to use, some cognitive behavior therapy techniques. Like there's one called examine the evidence, where you look at all the evidence as to why, whatever you're thinking is not accurate. Like, well, no, you think you're 12, but really you're 36. You think you underqualified, but this is your licensure and everything on paper says you're qualified. You were selected for a purpose. And just kind of hype myself up and remind myself of all the reasons why, everything I may be thinking that's a negative cognition isn't necessarily true. And that helps me. And sometimes I just sit there and fake it till I make it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely do the faking it till you make it.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I actually hadn't thought about in a while that you mentioned was like age and how imposter syndrome for me has kind of morphed a little bit from when I was younger. And I remember, I became a licensed attorney when I was 25 and I looked like a baby, and I had moved from Seattle to South Georgia. And so I spoke very differently also. And folks would frequently comment on how young I looked, in addition to that I clearly was not from around there because of how I spoke. And that did, in hindsight, really make me feel as though if they're uncomfortable with me being their attorney, then like maybe I should be uncomfortable with being their attorney. So even at times where like I didn't go into the situation feeling underqualified if a client was concerned about me being their attorney because of how young I was, meaning how inexperienced I was, then I would start to feel some kind of way. And again, like you said, faking it till I made it. And then also like over preparing was a tool that I used where like I don't want people to have to worry about my age and my inexperience because that's the fact of the matter. I was 25 and I was inexperienced. I really had to utilize the resources around me and actually do the work. Like for me, that was like a point in my life where I actually had to do the work to learn how to be a lawyer. And I think sometimes what I'm experiencing later in my professional journey is that, I don't know, sometimes there's work that's not about learning how to be a lawyer. Sometimes it's like relationship work or politics work or some other aspect of showing up in your profession and less about the actual lawyering. So anyways, thanks for sharing that, Veronica. Okay, Rhonda. So Rhonda has been practicing for quite a while and she considers herself mid-career. So I would love to hear, Rhonda, about how imposter syndrome shows up and what tools you've used. And like, does it show up for you anymore as somebody that's been practicing for a while?
Well, it does show up, but let me just start from the beginning because early in my career, I was young, like you said, and like everybody has said. And basically, you're looked at as a younger person being inexperienced. And opposing attorneys, I always felt like they knew more than I did, even though the law is the law and you can research it and be prepared. But still, for some reason, I felt inadequate. I remember walking into like a calendar call and there had to be like 30 white male attorneys and 2 African American women, my boss and myself. And I was like, oh my God. So, I had to center myself. She was there and she was the person who was actually, representing the client at that time. And I was shadowing her. But if she could not come, then I was the person that was supposed to, step up, be there. And it scared me a little bit. I was very intimidated. But I've learned tools now. I listened to what Cassandra said and Veronica. And I have like a prayer mantra that I say on the way to court. It's, asking God to give me strength to meet my life's demands pretty much is what I'm saying. And I just say it, 1 or 2 times. Now there have been times where I've listened to some mean rap music. So I just come in there like, like, pissed off. Like, I can't be touched kind of thing. And that has helped me as well. But I was listening to the rap music every time I came to work. And if I were a little late, so well, I'm late, but no, I had to kind of stop doing it. But yeah, it's evolved a lot. I no longer feel uncomfortable. Well, let me not say that. Sometimes I feel uncomfortable, but I tell myself I'm the person that's supposed to be here. I can do this. And I really prepare. When you were talking about over preparing, that has happened to me and it's actually good because the track record is every time I over prepare, it works out. It's amazing. I'm like, I stayed up all night and I negotiated this, but in hindsight, I would not have been able to negotiate it in my favor or in my client's favor without being prepared. So that helps. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. So are there times where you're still experiencing imposter syndrome?
I think I do, but it's less because, I really get off when somebody underestimates my ability. I like being underestimated because when I win, it's like, you could just see the shock in their face. That's kind of crazy. I even had an African American attorney tell me that he didn't think that I was that good. And he was shocked at how badly I whipped his butt up and down. I was like, yeah.
Yeah. I think like when I think about leveraging imposter syndrome, that's what I think about is like using to our advantage that other people have underestimated us. Because although I think like imposter syndrome is an internal thing that I experience, my perception of like the space that I'm in is that I should feel like an imposter, like I don't know if that makes sense. I just think that even though I think less of myself, that other people also think less of me. And so there are, like you're saying, Rhonda, times where I have been underestimated. And then if I'm over preparing or if I just know like my shit, then I love the satisfaction of proving myself. Yeah, that does feel good. And then you also mentioned listening to rap music, which
Yeah.
is like, I definitely have pump up jams. By the time I get to court, it's like straight head bobbing so that when I get out of the car and put on my heels, because I didn't drive in the heels, I'm feeling like an attorney. Cassandra, do you ever do that because of you have a drive to work?
I do it. I usually treat myself on Friday. No, Friday is the day where like it's the getting ready for the weekend, and I have definitely a pump playlist, and I am dancing in the car, and it really does set my mindset of like I've worked hard. This is time to get ready to relax and release.
Yeah, I will say I also do use music throughout the day, like if I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I used to work with Rhonda. And let me tell you that Rhonda had at the time a boombox that had to have been from like 1989 under her desk. And I swear, does it have a cassette player or is it just a radio?
No, it's the radio that you can get TV channels on, and I still have it.
Rhonda.
I've taken it from job to job to job.
TV channel?
Yeah, because I used to watch the stories a long time. I mean, listen to the stories a long time
See, you
ago.
dating yourself. And you talk about soap operas? Is that what stories means?
Right, soap operas,
He
exactly.
was watching Young and the Restless.
That was it. That was the only one that I had to see. The other ones I didn't have to see.
So I used to come into Rhonda's office because Rhonda was actually my supervisor. And so maybe I'm just wanting to talk to her, but maybe I'm actually looking for supervision. And she's listening to her music that is coming from under her desk. And she'll be like, 1 second, let me turn this down and have like a dial. And so she would be turning down the dial. It's hilarious. I forgot
It
all about
still
that.
works. And when I go into my office on Monday, I'm going to look at it and laugh. I just want you to know.
They don't make stuff like that no more, Rhonda. That's going to last that long.
They don't. Like, how is it even still like kicking?
I don't know. It has to be 20 years old.
It has to be more than 20 years old if it can get the TV on the radio.
That's hilarious. But okay, back to imposter syndrome. What I love to know, because part of the purpose for this show for me is to create community and support for like the younger me, because at this point I'm basically middle-aged at 35. But there are folks who are listening who are like at the start of their career or who have just transitioned from one career to another and who may be experiencing imposter syndrome, whether or not they feel like their imposter syndrome is affected by their race. And so what I'd love to know is what advice or support or encouragement, words of wisdom would you give your younger self entering into your current profession now that hindsight is 2020? So let's start with you, Cassandra.
I would really have encouraged someone to have like a support system, a professional network of maybe your sorority sisters, just your friends, your church groups. And then even if you could have someone like a mentor, someone that you trust, I think that mentorship is also very important. I started as an elementary school teacher, and like I had a group of peers that we constantly collaborated with each other with the different strategies that we use. One thing that I've learned over time that I think would have been helpful is that when I was experiencing a lack of confidence in me from supervisors and administrators, that I had the wisdom to not personalize it and really looked at the person who I'm having the conversation with and looking and assessing them. You know, there are times that the issue is more about that individual and their leadership styles than it really is about my abilities. And so that has really helped me more recently. And I feel like when people in leadership or administrators or supervisors don't feel competent and confident in their role, that they can make comments that leave someone to feel insulted, insecure. And so that's what I really wished. Like, don't personalize it. You know, trust yourself. Just be your best version of yourself every day. Strive for that.
Thank you. I was taking notes for the call to action at the end. And so one of the notes that I took, it was, don't personalize other people's shit.
Oh, bro, I got to say something. I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
There's just a phrase that I created a couple of years ago for myself. And it's so deep. And sometimes I have to tell, well, it's deep to me. I have to tell myself this. I said, do not eat other people's shit. Let them eat their own shit. And when you take it literally, would I ever eat somebody's shit? Hell no.
Right.
So why own that? I'd be damned. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, you know, don't eat other people's shit. Let them eat their own shit. And I tell that, and I've said that professionally. Yes, I have.
That's hilarious. I love it. I love that. I need to take that with me this week, for real, for real. Okay, Veronica, what's your advice or support or words of wisdom to the younger Veronica, the post-Katrina Veronica?
Oh, Lord. Because post-Katrina Veronica was a trip because she felt like she had to not be like the Katrina victim poster child. Like I had to rise above all the time. So what I would tell that girl is you're going to spend a lot of unnecessary time trying to get people to see that you belong there and you have something really good to offer and that you deserve like to get a good position or to be in a good place because you know what you're capable of, but you could get really discouraged when other people don't see it and seem to pick other people who, you know, just ain't you and be overlooking what you're bringing to the table. What you have to offer naturally is enough. And whether people see it or not, it's still going to make room for you.
What you have to add naturally is enough. I love that because to me, that speaks to liberation and authenticity. And that's to me like who I am and the gift that I have to give in the way that I have to give it is enough. I love that. Thanks, Veronica. Rhonda, what would you tell your younger self?
For my younger self, I would tell myself to be prepared. And when you are prepared, then you go on what you already know. I really like what I think somebody said, maybe Cassandra, about building a community, because that allows you to bounce ideas off of other people. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love our Sista Circle so much, because we get the opportunity to put something in our group chat and see what everybody's opinion is. Sometimes we have no opinions. Other times we have too many opinions. Other times it's just the right information that we need at the time. And even if it's not right at the time, sometimes we can go back and look at it. I also love our Sista Circle because they're different ages. People come from different places and different experiences. So it really helps to have a broad, idea about what other people think. But truly, having other people help you with strategy, that's what I think is the best thing that I could have done earlier in my career. Listen to other people bounce off ideas, but still go with what you think is right, because it's you that's making the decision. It's you that, you have the authority and the power to do what you're supposed to do. You just have to execute it.
Mm. You were talking about the Sista Circle and how diverse that we are. We all have very different personalities and come with very different perspectives. And we've got some folks who are like very lean heavily on their faith and are like the constant reminder, to me at least, that like I'm not alone in this humanly world, that there's a higher power, there's a God, and that like I can give this stuff to that being. And then there's people who are like very direct and like BS callers who are just like, no. And then we got our therapists who are always willing to go easy on us and be like, well, how does that make you feel? And I need all of that in my life. I need every last perspective. So yeah, I'm really appreciative of that. And I'm grateful that like I got to benefit from having a Sister Circle from really early on. If you heard a new tool today around how to overcome imposter syndrome, then I encourage you to think about that tool this week and give it a try. And so some of what we talked about was don't personalize other people's shit, or as Cassie says, don't eat other people's shit. Let them eat their own shit. Strive to be your best self every day. Remember that you deserve to be in a good position and like in a good place in life. Like if you've listened to this podcast, you've done the work that's got you into whatever the professional space is, and you deserve that. Know that and don't let anybody take it from you. Know that what you have to give is good enough. Be prepared and build a community around you of people who can support you and not people that are going to take from you. So, with that, I would love to hear if you have used any of these tools or if any of these thoughts have helped you as you go throughout your week. Feel free to send me an email at impostrixpodcast@gmail.com. You can, what do they say? DM me on the Instagram at impostrixpodcast. And you can also visit the webpage, impostrixpodcast.com. Thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to listen to past episodes and to subscribe. You can do that by pressing the little bell on your screen. You can also follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at Impostrix Podcast. I'm also on LinkedIn, and you can search me by just using my name, Whitney Knox Lee. I'm also on TikTok at Impostrix Pod, and I'm now on Threads at Impostrix Podcast. Also, feel free to leave me a message. I want to know what you think about this show. So you can do that by leaving a review, or you can do that by sending me an email at impostrixpodcast@gmail.com. This podcast is for me, and this podcast is for you. And I hope that you're leaving this podcast and this experience feeling validated, because that's the goal. Be validated. Until next time. What? You're still here? Man, you must really love me. Just kidding. Lucky for you, though. Part 2 is coming up.